Cool. Okay. So before you were working with me, where was your fitness and health like? And tell me a bit about that.
Sure. So I would say that my journey working with personal trainers has kind of been over the last decade or so, and have definitely had some great progress over that time, especially in comparison to the time that I spent working with myself before that. However, entropy is a really key part of making consistent fitness and strength uh, progress. And so just even, switching up methodologies and trainer kind of approaches becomes really, really helpful. And I'd say that in comparison to the other trainers I've worked with, you have been uh, definitely the best at keeping me on my toes, not letting me get comfortable with things, not letting me uh, get into grooves. Every time I find myself in a groove, and I feel like I know what's coming up the next session, we're doing something completely different, and I really appreciate that because that definitely keeps things novel, and that keeps things progressing very well.
Definitely. It's nice to keep you on your toes. I like the fact that it's different, but it's more so variations of something similar to what we were building on. So there's still opportunities to succeed there too, which is great. But yeah, anytime people usually ask like, "Oh, does it get any easier?" let them know like, "Yes," and then I just make it harder.
Yes,
So
exactly.
cool. Um, were you or had you had any sort of skepticism before working with a coach, or were you skeptical at all in regards to getting any sort of programming from someone?
I would say that I'm very much kind of sold on the process in this regard, and very much buy into the process. Um, so yeah, that being the case, I maybe my skepticism would be around different methodologies. However, I really think that working with a trainer is a key part of keeping accountable, and not even just accountable with consistency of showing up at the gym, but accountable with effort. There's no doubt that when I work by myself, it's at a completely different intensity than when I'm working with Santo. He's certainly not a drill sergeant or anything like that, but he like allows me to find the best of myself and not phone it in. There's always an empty tank coming from the end of those sessions, and so I really appreciate being able to you know dig deep in that regard, and find what I'm really capable of, and push those edges out on a continual basis.
Definitely, man. I think it's one of those things where, you know, there was an ESPN documentary I was watching where they were referring to like pro sports versus college sports. And they're saying like in a college change room, you got to hype up the players, but like when you're in a pro room, like you don't got to hype them up. They're already there. They're bought into the process. They know what it is.
Yeah,
So it's just matching your energy and pushing it a little bit further than that. So this way we make you a little bit uncomfortable, but enough where you're still going to see progress and be able to move the next day versus just kind of grinding you into the dirt for the most part.
absolutely. And I mean, really leading by example. Like, I really appreciate how Santo is very bought into the process himself, and I can kind of live vicariously through that. Just when we have our sessions, he kind of keeps me updated on how his sessions are going with his coaches, and so I can see what it would be like to take things to the next level and have an understanding of taking maybe a more professional approach to even my own fitness in that regard.
Thanks, man. I actually really appreciate that because I feel like you, it's got to be really hard to not have a coach and convince someone to get a coach.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
It's just a little bit disingenuous, and I think raises some concerns when someone's asking you to buy into a process that they're not willing to buy into themselves.
pretty much, yeah. I think like anybody else, I think there are times when, like you mentioned, I want to phone it in. Then I'm looking at this workout and I'm like, I know that I'm gonna have to talk to my coach, and she's gonna be like, "All right, well, why didn't you?"
Yeah,
It's like, coach,
yeah,
oh, okay. So answering to someone definitely helps keep you honest. That's for sure.
yeah. Appreciate that.
Uh, what was your biggest breakthrough with working with me?
Well, I mean, there's been a lot of metric uh, focused breakthroughs. Obviously, hitting 405 on the deadlift has been amazing. I wouldn't have been able to reach a milestone like that without Santo's guidance and assistance through that process. I would say that my overall conditioning has improved dramatically. The one thing that I think really separates good from great, even within amateurs in this space, is conditioning. And it's something that if you're not working with a coach who understands the importance of tying together the strength and the conditioning, it's going to be very challenging to push yourself. And just having imbalances between strength and conditioning, the those kind of weaknesses become very obvious very quickly, and it's easy to be in the gym and pushing big weights, but if you can't run for even a moderate distance as well, then I think your overall fitness is a bit in question in that regard.
Do you have any examples or any insight into when you've noticed a difference in your conditioning in like your day-to-day life? Or
Yeah, so I mean, I'm a pretty active person in general, but I'd say not so much in the day to day, but more in when I am hitting these like mile and a half tests and more intense kind of rowing sessions. I know that all I have to do is keep pushing, and I'm going to be able to like I have kind of this baseline of strength and conditioning that I know that I can rely on, and it's really more a matter of pushing through the mental toughness side of things than it is the physical side of things, because Santo and I have worked so hard to build this baseline of strength and conditioning that can be called upon when things get very difficult.
you had mentioned about the mile and a half run and harder rowing sessions. What's a specific result that we've had that really stands out to you?
So again, it's not something that I would say is a verifiable metric, but for me personally, when I was really pushing it in the first few tries in the mile and a half run, my heart rate got to a point where it was a little uncomfortable in terms of like how high it was, and that did concern me a little bit. And so being able to still push it as hard as I could, but lower that kind of cardiovascular discomfort and get that into a range where I knew I was still in control of my own body, to me, gave me a level of agency that, uh, you know, is very powerful in that now I can push things, and I know that there's this safety net that I've built in terms of my own cardiovascular health.
Definitely, man. It's nice to know that if you have to push it, you can, and that even if you're in a circumstance where you gotta rev a bit higher than maybe you're uncomfortable doing, that you can survive it versus like I've never been here, I don't know what's happening. Right.
Exactly. It can be very, very uncomfortable and very jarring. And yeah, it's really nice to be able to just even be able to rely on your own physiology.
Definitely. Uh, who would you recommend a program that I've been putting you on for?
So what do you mean by that?
So if you were to recommend this to somebody, say like a former version of yourself, like what would that person look like? How would what person would you recommend someone work with me?
So I would definitely like I think Santo would be very helpful bringing new people into a place where they could, be very high functioning and pursue their fitness goals. But, I personally referred a good friend of mine that Santo works with now, who's a former varsity athlete. and somebody who had the background but hadn't had the outlet to apply that athleticism to like post varsity athletics. And this person has thrived under Santo's guidance. And so it really, like, although I think Santo is adaptable to any type of kind of goals or fitness background, I think that the kind of higher on that scale you are, the more value you're going to get out of it, especially if you are high on that scale but have not been functioning as high as you could have been in more recent years. So getting yourself from, being into more amateur athletic state back into something resembling high performance athletics, I think Santo would be a fantastic coach and mentor for that.
I appreciate that, man. Thank you. Yeah, I feel like even for myself with my own background of like, hey, decently high level athlete for boxing, like everybody else does, goes into, becoming an adult, responsibilities, career, you kind of lose it a bit. It's like, okay, I got to get back into this, or, reestablish my health, like anything else, it ebbs and flows between building your health, and then after, maybe sacrificing that for a minute to try and revisit it. And I think there's often a degree of complacency that people can find themselves in, where it's like, well, it's okay, I don't need to do that. When meanwhile, when you work on that stuff, it allows you to have more gas in the tank to push through that discomfort in, every facet of your life. So it definitely translates well.
Yeah, I think a lot of people also, if they were especially engaged in high performance athletics when they were younger, they had like a network around them that was maybe managing some of these things, and they didn't have to necessarily take agency over their own situation in the same ways. And then when that kind of goes by the wayside and they're kind of doing things on their own, it's certainly not at the same intensity. And so finding somebody who can bring you back up to that intensity. I mean, I've definitely heard very positive reviews of Santo from people that have a very extensive athletic background.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it's interesting. Your coach takes care of a lot more than you think they do when you're a kid, and you're older and you're an adult, and you're like, all right, it's now an hour and I've gotten through the warm up.
Yeah. Even just like scheduling it from day to day that you even do those workouts at all, right? So
definitely, man. Yeah, and even just like the mental side of it, where it's like, hey, I don't feel 100% today. What are your thoughts? What should I do? What's the call? And just having someone to be able to make that call for you, or say, hey, did what I could today, and just reinstills recognizing the effort put forth versus the outcome of the day two, and being able to kind of pull you out of that, and recognizing, okay, maybe it's not athletics right now, but at the same time, your effort is still valuable, and being able to give it all that you can for the day. If you show up at 80%, giving 100% at 80% is what you can do, and realizing what's in your control in that current state. So
exactly. And I think we've talked about this extensively, is, every trip to the gym either presents an opportunity to build your strength and kind of physical toughness, or presents an opportunity to build your mental toughness if the first part is not revving as high as it normally would be.
Definitely, man. And I think that's a good thing that you do really well, that that I feel like I've also taken from you. I learn from all of my clients, obviously. It's not always me just giving information. I also learn from people too. And I think that's something that you've really shown me, as well as like, where are the areas of opportunity for today. And I feel like that's a good way to check in with people as well, and be like, okay, well, where's our area for opportunity for today? And it just changes the perception on the session too, when things maybe aren't revving as high. So yeah, I appreciate that.
And there's definitely, there's, I feel very comfortable showing up in any state, because I know that regardless of whether I'm feeling 100% or not, Santo's going to be able to assess where I'm at. And he's always shown an amazing awareness of being able to make adjustments on the fly, so that even if I'm only at 50%, we're still getting 100% of that 50% out of that session every time I step in that gym. And I don't have to call them up and say, oh, I'm not feeling well, I'm not going to show up today, because I know that I can show up and exist within some reasonable level of comfort, regardless of where I'm at.
Talking to Rachel about this yesterday too, because she had a session and she wasn't feeling super hot. And we were just talking about it. She's like, I looked ahead at the workout today, and I had this conversation with myself, and knowing that, okay, we'll be able to adjust things, I'm still going to show up. And she actually was saying similar to like what you had just said, of like, you match where I am for the day, and I appreciate that. And I had mentioned to her, well, when you don't, you try to be a rah coach and hype everybody up. That's some cancellation start, because you don't, I wouldn't want to show up to that. I'm going to show up to something where this, not that I don't want to take that energy from the person or be in that environment, but you need to kind of match and be maybe elevated just a bit from the energy level the person's presenting in front of you, and try to put them into a space where they feel comfortable to be who they are and perform how they can for the day. So
yeah. And for the record, looking forward to your programming is something I would suggest to never do at any point. But I know that I don't even have to, because regardless of, like, nothing's set in stone, regardless of what the plan for the day was. If there's opportunity to go ahead of that, we'll go ahead of that. If we got to pull it back a little bit, we'll pull it back a little bit. And we're going to get the most out of every minute that we spend together.
Appreciate that, man. Cool. Any closing thoughts before I end this recording?
It's been an amazing quarter again. Great way to start off the year. Santo and I just did a quarterly assessment, and all the metrics are trending in a much better direction than I thought they were going to be. And it's really amazing to be able to check in at regular intervals as well. Something I really appreciate from a coach is having these checkpoints. And yeah, really happy to move forward and take what we've built over the last quarter and apply it to our goals for the next quarter.
Awesome. Thanks, man. I appreciate that.